Welcome to Rock Solid Radio. I'm Linda Hutchinson, the Executive Director of Rock Solid Families.
And I'm Merrill Hutchinson, President of Rock Solid Families. And we are excited to have you join us as we talk all things faith, family, and fitness. A special thanks to Maxwell Construction and Mansfield Insurance Agency for their support of Rock Solid Radio, building a stronger community one family at a time.
Welcome to Rock Solid Radio. I'm Linda Hutchinson, the Executive Director of Rock Solid Families, and tonight's show is an important one for couples. Speaking of couples, I want to introduce you to my hubby, Merrill Hutchinson.
Hello, how are you doing today, honey bear?
I can't do a show on couples without you.
Yeah, well, you could, but I wouldn't get to weigh in, you know, and if I don't get to weigh in,
that's so
if
important.
I don't get to weigh in, it's just not going to be the same.
Yeah, and so before we get started on this show, hon, we do a lot of podcasts on marriage and family, and we a lot of times will send our clients to these shows to listen, and so we just want to make sure all of our clients out there and listeners know that we don't have all this figured out completely.
No, we usually get into a pretty good grappling match before every recording.
So, you know, we are a work in progress just like you. We are hoping that what we've learned and what we have experienced over 30 years plus of ministry is really hoping to help you so you don't fall in the same pitfalls that we have. So
yeah, and you know, I think probably we did a show on Strong Dads, our other podcast, with Jason Boyd, and this comes to my mind. He said, you know, the biggest thing that we found that helped us be parents was not a method or a technique or anything like that, but the biggest thing that we found was perseverance. Yeah. And that's the same thing that actually is the biggest thing that we need in our marriage, perseverance and humility. Yeah. If we continue to try and to come back to the plate and to you know, give it one more shot with the idea that we're coachable, we're teachable, right. we're humble enough to say, you know, I messed up. That's what keeps you and I going. Right. It's the arrogance or the pride that gets in the way that oftentimes we see folks where their feet are locked into the ground. They're not going to budge on issues. And it's just a righteousness that hurts the marriage.
But, hon, I don't want people to think they just have to grind it out and settle, because I don't think that that's God's design. I think God does want us to find a fulfilling relationship in our marriage. Yeah. He wants us to find joy, to have peace, to be in love. But for some, they would rather walk away and start over and think something's better out there. And that's not what God wants. He wants us to lean into one another. He wants us to look up to him, and he wants us to trust him in this plan, in this journey. So if you're out there and you're listening and things are not good for you in your marriage, will you please just listen tonight? There may be some things that you can take away. It's an important show for couples. I think that, you know, maybe some of you listening have not seen this growing up. You did not have healthy boundaries in your marriage. So we're going to spend some time tonight talking about how to put some protective guardrails or boundaries around your marriage to help your marriage succeed and not get off track.
All right, so boundaries in the sense of protection.
Yes.
Right? We're going to try to protect the relationship. Yeah. You know what? We better protect our show. And we better do that by saying thanks to some of our sponsors. So we want to thank Maxwell Construction for coming behind us, continuing to support Rock Solid Families. We thank them very much as they help Rock Solid Radio become kind of a mainstay. Yeah. I mean, well over a year now, and
they've been with us since the beginning.
55 shows now, and creating quite a bit of a nice library for our listeners to go back and use as a resource. So we want to thank Maxwell Construction. Maxwell was founded in 1988 by John Maxwell. Since that time, Maxwell Construction has grown and expanded to become among the most recognized commercial construction companies in the tri-state area. You know, the thing that separates Maxwell Construction apart from their competition is their emphasis on being service-oriented rather than just project-motivated. And so we we just really encourage you that if you have a school to be built, a restaurant, an apartment, a retail center, give Maxwell Construction a call. You can reach them at 812-537-2200.
Yeah, we also want to thank Mansfield Insurance Agency, Jim Mansfield at Mansfield Insurance. They have a reputation and built on caring and listening and protecting their customers. You know, Jim started this business back in 1981, and he's been dedicated to his individuals and businesses in Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky. So if you have insurance needs, call Mansfield Insurance Agency at 1-800-230-3927.
All right. Well, again, we always want to thank those guys. You know, the other folks that we want to thank are the continual growing list of sponsors that just help sponsor Rock Solid Families through donations and support. Guys, we don't exist without you. And this is the hardest part of what we do. We love coaching, working with marriages, working in the fitness world. We love that stuff. We love the writing, and we love doing the podcast. But much of what we do does not pay a direct action for exchange of a payment. And so the doors stay open by you guys sponsoring and supporting us with your donations. So if you would, come alongside of us. You can go to our webpage of rocksolidfamilies.org and hit the donate button. So that leads us into some different things that are going on, doesn't it?
So November is our Rock Solid Partnership Month, where we celebrate and thank the many families and businesses that have come along Rock Solid over the last year. So we want to highlight and thank those who have been out there supporting us through prayers and encouragement and financial gifts. You know, people like Maxwell Construction and Mansfield Insurance Agency that have just been there, and individuals that have said yes, to healthy families and supported us through sometimes monthly support, which we so appreciate. It helps us to budget better for the 2020 budget, or one-time gifts. You know, you are making a difference, We've actually had some folks who have had employer matches. So they'll donate and their employer will match that. That's been awesome. We also have had people who have donated volunteer hours, and their company will give a payment to a nonprofit in their name, which was very cool. We've had that. So, you know, it's been cool to see what's been going on. You know, we've had premarital couples coming in our doors who've committed to a life of sexual purity. We've had teens and adults who are breaking chains of abuse and finding hope and healing in God. We have couples who did maybe not grow up with a faith foundation, and for the first time, they're choosing to build their home on the unshakable rock of Jesus Christ. So we've had families who've been divided for years coming together, working through their pain. So all of this, is from their support and the power of God and His Word. So thank you. Thank you.
So yes, thank you. You know, the thing that I think is most motivating for you and I and what we're doing is we see all the social ills that are out there. I listen to way too much radio and other news and stuff like that. And other podcasts.
There are some podcasts just addicts out there, I've learned.
Yeah. And some are healthy and some are not. But the idea that we hear about all these social ills, and you guys, you've got to hear, so this is our motivation. The number one thing that we can do to curb and even stop these social ills is a strong family. And that's what motivates us. I mean, the number one fix for poverty is a strong family. The number one fix for depression and anxiety and suicide ideation. Is that the right word?
Ideation.
And maybe speaking is strong families, you know. And so these are things that are just huge in what we're trying to do. And, you know, when we focus inward to our home, one is a place I can control. I can't control too much of the government, you know, but I can control what's inside my home and in my relationships.
I mean, schools, strong churches, strong communities. It starts with a strong family.
And we've got to put our emphasis on that. I was just speaking with my son this morning and talking about some of his friends. And I just asked him, I said, so, okay, of all your buddies, you know, which ones kind of struggle in school and struggle with some discipline stuff? And he named them, okay? And then I said, well, tell me about their families. And I didn't say this, he said, well, everyone I named doesn't have a dad in the house.
Wow. Did he really say that?
He said
Wow.
that. He said that. And I was just blown away that he was perceptive enough to see that. So very interesting stuff. This is not rocket science. This is what we're going to talk about today.
It's hard work.
Yes, protecting your family, protecting your marriage.
And hun, this topic is huge. We're talking, if you just tuned in, we're talking about guardrails to protect your marriage. These podcasts are not just for the random listener who may find us online, but they're for the families that we work with. And this topic is a huge one we are constantly dealing with when we're coaching families and couples. Again, we're talking about how to protect your relationship, how to safeguard it before we get ourselves in trouble, before we crash and burn. Some of this is common sense, like you're gonna be like, duh. But some of the things maybe you think are extreme or ridiculous. Those are the ones I really want you to think about.
Well, they seem extreme and ridiculous because we've allowed the way of the world in so many areas to creep in. And I use the word creep because it is a slow taking over of your family. In my Strong Dads work, we talk about one of the main roles of dads is to be the protector of the family. And we talk about how all of these things creep in, the internet use, the phone use, how your kids slowly get desensitized. We were watching a TV the other day, and the title of the TV was a curse word, or the show was a curse word. I mean, it was all about cars, and it was a cool show about cars, but the title is a curse word.
Here's your sign.
And it's like, my younger son said, are they allowed to use that? I was like, well, you know what? That's just where we are today.
Used to not be able to do it, but
So we have to be protectors.
Yeah. So in other words, why are you pushing back on some of these? Is it because you've already kind of gone down the slippery slope and you don't know how to pull it back? Is it because there's a great temptation there you can't seem to overcome? So our prayer is that we're going to give you some things today that you're going to think about, pray over, things to talk about as a couple before it gets escalated, before you find yourself on the edge of destruction. So if you're listening and you're thinking, oh, it's too late, that cow's already out of the barn, please just listen. Seek wise biblical counsel. There is hope and help out there. We've worked, you and I, hun, with some pretty crazy stories, some crazy situations that God has redeemed.
Yeah, and the idea that when we say we've worked with, but they've done the work.
Sure, they have done the work. We're not doing it for them.
Yeah, they come in with the idea of what we are doing is not working, and they know that there's hardcore work involved. So, all right, so we're going to talk about protecting our marriage, putting guardrails up, and these are things that some of them are going to make you go, really? Yeah, I mean, is it that big of a deal? But just listen to us. Let's walk through some of these, and let's talk about how you can be a little bit more secure in the protection, and it helps to develop the trust.
Right.
You and I like certain things, like my cell phone is available for you to see at any time. That transparency, I don't need to hide because you know what, if it's on there, it's for you to see too. And that's a guardrail that you and I have put together.
Yeah, hun, I want to give some kudos here to where this word came from for me. Guardrails. Years ago, one of my favorite preachers and authors, Andy Stanley, preacher down at North Point in Georgia, he did a whole sermon series on this, and he called it Guardrails. And he talked about sexual purity. He talked about finances. He talked about marriages. The series really stuck with me, and you and I taught it several times in small group situations, these series. But man, these principles really are at the crux of a healthy relationship. And so I believe, and he describes it, the fact that guardrails are not something you're supposed to be bouncing off of,
Wait, but my car's got a bumper.
But, the idea is that you stay far away from the edge. And so the guardrail keeps you from going over the edge. But the guide, it's supposed to guide you to keep you on that path so you don't hit the guardrail.
Yeah, it helps to define the road that we're going to travel.
Right.
So, Proverbs 27:12 says, the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. And that's, this is when we talk to our kids about, we set a boundary, and some of our kids go, oh, if that's the boundary, I'm going to stay away. And some of them say, how close can I get? How close can I get? And, some of that is by our nature. It's by the risk that we want to take. and sometimes the risk reward payoff, it seems worth it to us. And so we want to really talk about, okay, so is losing your family, is that worth the reward that you're thinking
that
you're going to get?
freedom that you want.
Yeah.
I love it. And that was the NIV you just read. The NLT version translation says, a prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. A simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the
A
consequences.
simpleton. A simpleton. Is that you called me a simpleton once? I remember that.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, to kind of not just go blindly into this. So if you're going to listen to this tonight and then push back and say, oh, I don't have to do that, or I can do that if I want. Sure, you can.
Yeah.
But how about looking ahead and what that looks like to your marriage, to your family? Is it worth the danger, like you said? So are you going to be prudent or simple?
Yeah. So let's tackle. So we're going to go through on this part of the show and really work through some very specific.
You might want to even take notes.
Yeah, just some areas that you go, okay, how am I doing? How are we doing in this area?
Yeah.
The first area that we really want to address is your time at work. How about you with your work? What are you doing with your work? How long are you at your work? How much is your work a priority or taking time away from the family or from the marriage?
This is huge. Yeah. We did a show last year, about finding balance. People can still tune into. Do you have a healthy work-life balance? You just did a show on this for Rock Solid.
Yeah. For Strong Daddies.
For Strong Dads, yeah. And so does your spouse feel like he or she ranks below the boss or the job? That can erode a marriage over time.
And you have to question yourself, like, I do work a lot of hours, but we always put a but in there, and the but I'm providing for the family.
Right.
I'm a supporter. And we're going to ask you to dial that back. This is where we become a little bit more humble, and we say, okay, wait, what is my true motivation?
Right.
And what is it costing me? And so sometimes I find many of the men that I work with invest overly in their work because it's fulfilling.
Yep.
It creates a spark.
They get a pat on the back there.
Yeah, and maybe the marriage is not creating the spark that the work does. And so that is a conversation that needs to take place, because if the marriage is not creating that spark, that energy, then we have to figure out what we need to do to do that. And again, I love that you love your work. Yeah. All right. But priority needs to be established here.
And I've had couples who have said, I'd rather be at work. Yeah. I don't want to go home. And so you really need to evaluate, why are you putting all those hours in? Is there somebody at work? Maybe there's someone who's, telling your itching ears what you want to hear, and they're, attaboys right and left. And so you love that, and almost you're drawn to it. That's danger. Yeah. You are hitting the guardrail right now.
Okay. So that's your time at work. Yeah. All right. The next one is, this drives parents crazy when we talk about this.
Yeah. We've done a lot of shows on this.
Yeah. And I will say, I'm going to call you ladies out. We see this to be a larger problem with our moms. I'm not saying it can't be with a dad, but I'm saying when we look at the folks that we work with, this tends to be a bigger obstacle.
There's guys out there right now going, you preach it. You know it, brother. That's right.
And so this is spouse before kids. The spouse before the kids. The relationship with your spouse is more important in terms of your... Not time, not necessarily time, because we've talked about this before in other shows. Sometimes kids, because of the time of life that they're in, require more time.
If you have a newborn,
Right, but a priority in terms of where I'm going to put my emphasis of attention and make sure it doesn't get slacked off. It needs to go spouse first. God, of course, is supreme, right? And then your spouse. And so this is hard, because sometimes, our spouses can drive us crazy, or their old hat, or their habits that aren't going to change.
Or they don't whine and complain like the kids do.
Right. And maybe they're not filling us up, and so we start to dump our time into the kids, because maybe one, it's a natural calling and feeling that we have to take care of, but two, maybe they just create a little bit more energy in us.
Yeah, this is so dangerous, because also what you've done is you put your children children on a pedestal and they feel like they run the home. They feel like they're the center of your universe. So mom and dad, you have got to be a united front. You've got to stay a priority in the home. I was just talking with some couples this week about that. They need to hear you say, no, mom and dad are talking right now. Or mom and dad are going out tonight. We want to go. No, mom and dad are going out tonight.
Right.
They need to see that.
Yeah, and
your spouse needs to see it.
If mom says it to the child, I back it up as the husband.
Right.
If dad says it to the child, mom, you've got to back it up. I've worked with more than a few couples where when one of the couples is not there, when one of the partners is not there, they dismiss what the other said to the kids. Oh, I know he said you should do this, but don't worry about it. You know what? We'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And right away, you just completely conflicted the child's message of the relationship that you have with your spouse.
And if you can initiate this, mom, this goes a long, long way. Your husband is going to feel so valued and really important as a priority. Hun, this one is, oh my goodness, I have dealt with this before. Ladies and gentlemen, who is your best friend? If it is a person of the opposite sex, whether it be at work, whether it be your neighbor, whether it be, a couple that you hang around with and you just get along with that person, if you find yourself confiding in that person about how tough things are at home or how difficult your spouse is, it may not be at work. It may be a neighbor, like I said, your child's little league coach. I don't know, fill in the blank. But please, please put a guardrail up right now and do not let anyone else slip into that number one role. I have had so many men, hun, and women tell me that someone of the opposite sex is their best friend. And to me, that is a huge red flag.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is almost a common sense. I mean, if my best friend is a female, there's an attraction there.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, there's an attraction.
People say there isn't, but...
Yeah, no, I mean, it might be an emotional attraction. It might be a pleasure attraction. It might be a physical attraction, but probably, it's all the above in some level. And so this is just a huge no-no because it'll all be fun and games at first until all of a sudden you're having a bad day with your partner, your actual spouse, and that person becomes the person you confide in. Yeah. And at that point, you just fractured the relationship with your partner. I want to touch on this, hon, because we talked about the idea of it being opposite sex, but I also want to talk about, we wrote the question there, who's your best friend? Even if your best friend is of the same gender as you better really evaluate who they are and what they do to the marriage that you're in.
Good point.
If you are in a friendship with somebody, your best girlfriend or your best guy friend is feeding you information that is somehow contrasting or conflicting a message with your spouse. Like you go and you complain. I know that you would never complain about me, but if you complained about me to one of your girlfriends and they add it to the complaint. Yeah. If they add it to the complaint.
Fueled the fire.
Yeah, they just fractured our marriage.
Or, you need to drop him like a hot potato, man. You deserve better than that. I mean, I've heard that before.
Oh, yeah. And again, so a guardrail, a guardrail says, you know what, I do love this other person. They're a good friend, but I cannot allow that sort of cancerous talk to creep in because it doesn't leave me very easily.
Right. And you bring up a good point, hon. I have recently had a couple that he has friends out of town, and he spends hours and hours and hours and hours doing online gaming with his friends out of town because, he wants to stay connected to them. But on the other hand, his wife's sitting there feeling like she's not a priority. And so, therefore, he needs to restructure that to make sure that, his wife feels like she's the priority.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on. So there's another one that this has kind of become an old standard for us as we talk. The Billy Graham rule. Hun, you want to tell us what the Billy Graham rule is?
Yeah, very early on in his marriage, the evangelist Billy Graham adopted the policy that he would not dine alone or travel with or meet alone with women who were not his wife. Graham knew how quickly a rumor or accusation can destroy not only his marriage, but their marriage. So, hun, I got to tell you, if you Google this, it is crazy how many people say this is discriminating against women. That's how sick our society is that by putting up healthy guardrails about how you meet with women, meet with men alone, like somehow that makes you less of a kind person. I disagree. But, out there, anything gets twisted into something that they want to see and hear. So I believe it's called being above reproach.
Yeah, this is, I know Mike Pence, our vice president, has been under attack because he has mentioned the Billy Graham rule that he implements in his marriage. And, he was under attack for that. And, I got to just back off and throw the politics out. Let's just talk about what it's doing for his family.
Yeah.
That's what our priority is. But before he worries about the politics, he needs to worry about his family.
Right.
And if we had more politicians worrying about their family and taking care of their family, we would see a whole lot better politicking going on.
Well, and I think the point is that, he can't have self-control. It's sometimes nothing to do about him. It has one accusation from one crazy woman who wants to take him down for the Democratic Party or whatever, or for the church. It just is not worth it. It's not worth your reputation. It's not worth your marriage. It's not worth your ministry and your career.
Yeah. And so this goes on. We kind of continue it, just with the meeting with same-sex clients, put guardrails up with that. In our business, this is sometimes challenging because we do coaching, and sometimes as a personal trainer, I'll get a lady that wants to be trained, and you and I have to figure out how to set a guardrail up for that, whether you're in the building when that's happening, or I have another person that comes in and we train together.
Right.
So that's something that we're always trying to be conscious of. I even share that with the lady clients that I have. Well, here's what I need to make sure we are very protective of. And, most of them go, I appreciate that you do that.
Right. That's why you counsel with men if they're coming in alone. I counsel with women if they're coming in alone. We don't do the opposite there. Hun, I believe that the whole idea of no secrets is important. How we spend our time. Make a commitment right now, if you're listening, that you're not going to keep your day a secret. Don't go anywhere or do anything that you wouldn't want to tell your spouse. You wouldn't want them to find out. Now, obviously, if I'm shopping for your Christmas present.
Well, I always find out anyway.
You do. I don't like it.
I'm so good.
How do you do that? You just...
I sneak.
You spoil
I know everything.
But, you remember, Hun, when you had your fitness business and you had your number on the outside of your truck?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. It was so funny. I had a friend who called me one day, and she was heading up to Dayton. And she says, I think I just saw your husband, So you couldn't sneak around with your phone number.
No, I had
my
big old phone number right on the side of my truck, which was fine. It was, and the same thing happened to you once. You were headed to...
I had your truck.
To get a haircut or something, headed over to the other side of town.
Yeah.
And somebody said, what are you doing over there? And I'm like, I'm not there.
I know.
But again, it's not. Let's stop for just a second. This is not about spying.
No.
And not being trustworthy of our spouse, so we creep on them.
Or giving them every single stinking detail of your day.
Right, we stalk on them. Please, that's not what this is about. If you're stalking and trying to catch your spouse into doing something wrong, your motive may not be very accurate with what we're trying to put across here.
Right.
So please, this is under the idea that we already have trust and we're trying to keep the trust.
Right, exactly.
It's different if I don't have trust. That's when I'm going to try to be sneaking and figure out, is there other violation going on here?
Yeah.
But this is all based on the idea that we already have trust and we want to maintain trust.
Right, yeah. So, if your boss took you and your coworkers to a nice restaurant and you're with a bunch of guys and, that you might have a friend that sees you out or sees your husband out and says something. So, those kind of things where you just kind of let them know, like, hey, my boss took me out to dinner today, all of the guys in our apartment. So, it just lets them know that you're not keeping anything from them. Hun, what about the digital safeguards? In this day of digital age, I think it's really important that we have each other's passwords. We know each other's accounts. If you struggle with porn in the past, that you set up software to protect your eyes or get an accountability partner. We have know a situation where couples, literally have tried to include other people in their relationship. You just want to keep those safeguards from the intimacy for just the two of you. You know?
Yeah. And, again, this is that idea that if there was a problem with pornography or something like that in the past, then the person who was guilty needs to be very quick to say, I am open about this.
Yes.
You can see everything.
Yes, don't be
defensive. If you don't do that, is all you're doing is you're preventing trust from growing.
Yeah. Stay away from those old flames, rekindling hidden friendships online. Please, no secrets with your spouse. So, hon, what's our homework? Before we close, we're going to wrap this up. What do we want our couples to do?
Yeah. Well, the first idea is that you come together and you agree that this is what you want to do. If for some reason one of you is holding back on this, that's a red flag to us.
It is.
And so you have to come together and say, you know what, let's, we do see that we can be under attack or tempted at different times. And so let's see what we need to do to protect the marriage that we have.
And
so you
sometimes,
first have to have that conversation.
Yeah. And sometimes the conversation does not go well because our approach is pretty attacking.
Sure.
So I've seen that where maybe they don't have anything to hide, but it's like, man, can you come across a little bit kinder? Right now I feel like I'm about 2, So that's really important. But once you decide the guardrails you set up, tell somebody else. This is when you tell another couple. This is what you tell your kids. Maybe it's a sibling, a coworker. So they know this is something that we've decided is important.
Yeah. So in 1 Peter 5, 7 through 9, it says, give all your worries and cares to God, for he cares about you. Stay alert. Watch out for your great enemy, the devil. Oh, man, this part right here just gets me. He prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Stand firm against him and be strong in your faith. Remember that your family of believers all over the world is going through the same kind of suffering you are. We've used this verse before in different situations, and it just reminds us that, evil or Satan just can't wait for you to fall apart and divide your family, because he knows it's taken us a long time to figure out that family is the most important part of keeping our civilization healthy. But he knows if I can break your family, I can slowly erode this country.
He's the real enemy of your marriage, not your partner, not somebody else on the outside. So, what an important show tonight, hon. Our prayer is that these safeguards protect your marriage, of everyone that's listening, that you're going to go share this. Tell somebody else that this is something that you've put in place to protect your marriage, to safeguard your relationship. That's the only way, guys, we're going to be able to protect ourselves from the enemy. So let's shine some light into the darkness. Let's call out the enemy for who he is. He is the great deceiver.
Yeah.
Okay?
All right. Well, great. So we need to close things out. We want to say thank you to Maxwell Construction again. We are thankful for their support. Maxwell is just such a huge community supporter, so we thank them also for that. So for all your construction needs in the tri-state area, you call out Maxwell Construction.
We also want to thank Jim Mansfield and Mansfield Insurance Agency. Jim cares about his community and he cares about his customers. So Mansfield Insurance Agency is a sponsor of both Rock Solid Radio and Hun, our other weekly podcast, Strong Dads. So if you have any insurance needs, call Jim at Mansfield Insurance Agency, 1-800-230-3927.
All right, it's time to sign off for Linda and I. We say thank you for tuning in to Rock Solid Radio, building a stronger community one family at a time. Make it a great day.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Rock Solid Radio. For help or more information about what you've heard on today's show, contact us at rocksolidfamilies.org or call us at 812-576-ROCK. That's 812-576-ROCK. Again, a huge thanks to our sponsors, Maxwell Construction and Mansfield Insurance Agency. If you have questions you'd like answered on our show, or you want to chime in on something you heard, go to our Facebook page, Rock Solid Families. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to tune in next week for another episode of Rock Solid Radio. I'm Linda Hutchinson, and for my husband Merrill and I, thanks for tuning in to Rock Solid Radio, building a stronger community, one family at a time.